All right, we're back. We're gonna go ahead and prep cylinder to put it back on the engine case. Now I went ahead and I've re-honed this cylinder. It was not out of round or anything. It was in pretty good shape, so we just did a simple hone with it, just to clean it up a bit. And we're using the stock pistons. There's no need to swap them anything aftermarket. I mean, you need to machine a aftermarket piston with your cylinder anyways. Otherwise you risk the chance of piston slap, and eventually the motor it'll break itself down. So what we want to do today is we're going to gap the piston rings. This is the brand of rings I like. I've never had a problem with them. They work good with regular cast pistons. Like I say, I'm not running Fords or anything aftermarket. I have no need. On a regular, everyday running motorcycle, these cast pistons will work just fine. So, you have the second ring, and then you have the first ring. Now you don't want to mess these up. You don't want to put the second on top, and vice versa. So the second one on this particular package, it has a dot. I don't know if you can see it, but it has a dot right here on the ring. And that dot is to face up. Okay. Now, this other ring, it has no markings. It has no machining or anything. This one here does. This one here has a little bit of machining on the inside of it, on the bottom side of the ring. So that machining is going to face down, and that dot will face up. Okay. A lot of guys don't gap their cylinders, their ring, should I say. They suspect, well, this is a stock piston, and these are stock rings. It should fit just fine, and that's not always the case. Sometimes when you buy these rings, you put them in there, and you won't have enough gap. Now, what happens with that is these rings, when they're in here, they're real tight like so, but when the motor gets hot, everything expands, and these rings can actually come in and touch one another. And what will happen is if them rings come in and touch, the whole ring will start to bind itself, and it can crack a ring, it can score and tear up your cylinder and so forth, to do all kinds of damage. So it's very important that you gap your rings, and it doesn't take a whole lot. All I'm using today, I'm just using a simple file. You can even use a piece of 320 or 80 grit sandpaper, laying the sandpaper on a corner of something, and you can move the ring across it, and you can take small amounts of material off. Like I say, it's very small amounts. So we're going to go ahead and check them. And the way I like to do that, just take the ring with your cylinder cleaned and everything, and sit it down inside there. You'll have to push it, and be very delicate, very careful what you're doing. Take your time. Don't get in a hurry. And then take your piston. You can do either direction, but put the piston in there, and you can watch. You see your ring glands. You can push down. I usually go down about the second ring gland, and I'll make sure it looks even all the way around. That's how you can use that as a tool to make sure that your ring's in there straight. Pull that back out. Now I've got a gauge here. It's 14 thousandths. Depending on what you're using the engine for, if you are, let's say you're racing it, you're going to be a lot hotter. Let's say you're even turboing this motor, right? You'll run a higher gap. Now this stock, everyday running motor, 14 thousandths. That's good. That's a good number. So what you do is with that in here, you've got your ring gap, and you want to be able to put this down in there, and I could tell just by looking at it was plenty. That's probably about 15. It's a little bit looser, but that'll be fine. It's good enough for who it's for. So that one's good. one there we don't have to take any off of. And we'll check the top ring. It doesn't matter if you put it in this way or that way, it doesn't matter one bit. So do the same with this. Take your piston. Like I say, use them little ring glands. That's a nice little tool. That way you know that ring's in there straight. Because if that ring's in there cockeyed, that's not going to give you an accurate measurement. If that ring's more spread out, you think that, well, okay, well, there's a lot of slop in there, and then when it does go straight inside the piston, and then you've got 10,000ths of a gap, and that's not enough. I mean, it could be. And see that one there, it fits right in. It's nice. That's right at 14 thousandths, it feels like. So, go ahead and pull this one here out. And then we're ready. And now your oil rings, you don't need to gap these. I mean, you could check them if you want, but, you know, they don't expand like these here do. You know, these are much less, these are very delicate, they're brittle. And, you know, and when these rings sitting there anyways, they have a lot more slop. See, I'm looking at it right now, and there's over 20 thousandths of gap in there. These are not designed to hold any kind of air pressure. They're simply to hold the oil and keep it inside the cylinder, but allowing just enough to be up onto these top two compression rings. That's it. So, we're going to go ahead. We're going to prep this piston in. I like to start with this ring. It's on the bottom. Now you'll see this. You'll see these points where the ring comes together. These points are facing upward, right? Make sure you point them upward on these particular cylinders, Harley Davidson's. And also with your oil rings, you do not need to know. You don't need to. Excuse me. It does not matter if they go top or bottom. It does not matter one bit. They're the exact same. Now these rings are not that delicate, but you still want to be careful. The moment if you pinch this ring or if you kink it just a little bit, the ring's junk. You're not going to save it. If you do that, don't try to just throw it in there and run it. Don't do that. Get them. I mean, these rings are so cheap. Now we're not worried about ring positioning right now because while we're putting these other rings on, the rings are going to spin around us anyway. So we'll wait until that's all said and done when they're oiled up, and then we'll set them where they need to be. So this is the top ring, and this is the second ring. So make sure the dot's facing upward, right? Now these ones are more brittle, so you can use a tool to do it. You can do it by hand too. You just got to be very delicate. One groove. Okay. You put them in there too. See, I've done cleaned them out already. But what I'll do is I'll take the old rings before I pull them out, and I'll put some kind of a solvent down on here, and I'll roll and twist these around. That'll clean up any carbon stuff that's down in there, and that way when these new rings go in, you want to be free flowing. You don't want them tacky, because if they're tacky, they can freeze up inside there. Alright, now you got your top ring. Like I say, it does not matter. It has no indication, any kind of markings that shows which direction it goes. It's perfectly square. We'll go ahead and put it on here. Do not overstretch this ring. And what I mean by that is don't try to open it up more than the piston's diameter. I mean just a little bit too much, and they will break. They're very fragile. So, and what I do here is you can use an assembly lube. You know, you can use the assembly lube we've used, but me, I'm gonna be starting this motor up in the next week. So this, you know, just whatever, the 2050 regular oil works just fine. I like it because it gets down in there a little bit better than the other stuff does. There's no such thing as over oiling this. You're not going to over oil it. But there is such thing as under oil. You don't want to under oil this thing. It's got to be completely saturated. I'll put them in there and I'll just spin them around. Make sure that oil's inside the ring glands and make sure there's no tacky spots. I mean, because when you first start this motor up, it might take a minute or two before there's oil up into these rings. That's why if you're going to be building a motor and it's going to sit around for a while, putting some kind of a good assembly lube in there is better, because it does stay put. But if you're building this motor and you're putting it together the same day and starting it up, or within a few days, this is just fine. So, this is the front of the motor right here. Okay. There's different techniques to do this. Everybody has their own ways. This is the way I know. The oil ring, we'll find that where it's that piece I was saying is pointing up. So we're going to point that towards right at the front. Okay. Now the bottom ring. Let's find that bottom ring here. Right there it is. So we'll go on the very bottom. We'll just line it right up with this pin. Okay. Now hold the top still, or the middle one, and spin that top one around. Do 180 degrees with it. We'll put it right to the other side. This one's still there. If it moves around a little bit, it ain't gonna hurt nothing. It's fine. Now, take your compression rings forward. Now you want to do not a complete 180 degrees, but more on the lines of, you'll have one kind of facing this direction, and then you'll have one over here about like that. So almost maybe a 45 degree angle. Now, different manufacturers, different motors, they like a full 180 degrees, but for some reason Harley Davidson likes this angle, 45. So I'll do the bottom one right up here, and then I'm going to turn the other one right there. Now, could you do 180? You could. I don't see why not. I don't think it's going to hurt nothing. So, and a lot of guys, they'll put these on the cylinders or on the rods themselves, and then they'll try to slip the cylinder or the cylinders on top. I like to put them in here first, and I put the whole jug and piston right down on there. One side will have a key in. You slip down over, you slip the pin over, and then you can put your key in. It's simple as that. You don't have to sit there and try to fight to get them rings over. What you'll do now, though, let me go get it. Remember, one side fits a little better. Well, you can tap these in, but just be gentle with it. And don't use anything. Don't use a hammer. We don't want to ever mushroom any of the edges. Just a light tap. Just like that. And so, I was saying though, put this clip in first. That way, whenever you run this, whenever you put that over top of your rod, you can send this pin all the way in, and that pin's already in. You don't have, or that key's already in. And that'll be another video. I'll show you that. So, and that's it. So, I'll show you. You can slip this over right now. Make sure that's the front of the cylinder. Yeah, so that's front. This is front over here. Make sure the rings are where it's supposed to be. Now, you can use a tool, you can use a sleeve, but you can do it by finger like this too. Just using your nails, or you can use a screwdriver. But be so careful not to ding or bind anything up. You see that side just dropped in? Now, don't try to force it the rest of the way. Just walk it all the way around. Sometimes they'll pop out. That's okay. Up here in Michigan, we got all winter to do this. So we like to take our time and be done right the first time. Okay, there's one. Okay. Weasel them around. Take your time. Okay, like that. Now don't hit it until you know them other rings, until they're past that edge. Because if they're on that edge and you do him, it's a good possibility you could break the ring. And you don't want that. So, like I say, plenty of light. It's your first time doing it. Take your time. Take your time. Doesn't matter how long it takes you. So, the key is do it one time. So, there you go. It's prepped, and all we got to do now is, and they'll stay there too. So we can just put it right over top of the cylinder, or the block itself. Put the rods inside there with the assembly lube, and knock them through.